of a check-in for us to see, how are things going within our own lives? We know that when we're wise, we check out our physical health as well. We don't always want to wait for just something to go bad terribly, that we're monitoring, that we're checking in. And I think the same needs to be true when it comes to the condition of our heart. I heard another pastor speak on this reality named Andy Stanley, and it got me thinking of just the importance of us constantly checking in and asking ourselves the question, how is it with my heart? I mean, really, how is it? Because we live in a culture that oftentimes perpetuates this idea that as long as we appear as if we have it all going on the outside, then that is okay, when inside we know that things are not okay. And to push it even a step further, unfortunately, the church gets caught up in this as well, where we suddenly begin to think that we need to be perfect, we need to make it seem as if we've got it all sorted out, and we don't have any problems lurking in. But when you go back and look at the reality of Jesus, this was one of the key and central issues that he was constantly addressing. The people he often was at odds with were a group of people called the Pharisees. That would be a modern-day equivalent of very good church-going folk. They would show up to temple, they'd show up on Sunday mornings like we would and be faithful. They would make sure they were reading their Bible and they knew what the Bible said. They made sure to be giving the right portion back to God. They were doing everything on the outside because they felt that as long as they had this appearance of being godly, that then they would be accepted by God. And Jesus so often would say, no, you've got your priorities mixed up. It's not the outward appearance, it's the inner reality that will then determine how you live. And so we want to use this series as an opportunity to check in a little bit. And it's an opportunity for us, I believe, you're going to get as much out of these next 4 weeks as you're kind of willing to put in. There's going to be the temptation when you hear these talks and be like, oh yeah, I know someone who so needs to hear this. Nudge, nudge. Right, or me thinking, there's someone else in my workplace or a colleague or a boss who, or a fellow coworker or a family member, they need to hear this message. And I know we so want to go there, but let's not. Let's use this as an opportunity to say, okay, what is going on within me? Because there's going to be something lurking around all of us, and it's the reality of pride. And one of the things that pride loves to whisper into your ear is you don't have a problem. You don't have an issue. Pride loves to deny. And so what we want to do is just expose some of the symptoms so at least we can be aware of what is going on. If you're suffering from an actual heart attack, there's symptoms that begin to come. You get tightness in your chest. You start to feel dizzy. You start to feel sick. You start to feel numbness in your arm. And it's not wise to ignore it, because if you ignore the symptoms, a greater problem is actually going to occur. And the same is so true with the reality of our heart. That when we ignore some of the early symptoms and some of the early signs, we're not actually doing ourselves any favors. We're not actually doing others around us any favors. And ultimately, we're not helping our relationship with God and making that any better either. And so let's have some honest conversation and to begin to see, okay, is this an issue in my life? What are the warning signs? What are some of the symptoms so that we can then be proactive to begin living in a way that ultimately is going to make us better, is going to help our relationships with others become better, and eventually make our relationship with God even better. Early on in Jesus' ministry, in Matthew chapter 5, when he's kind of laying out what he is all about, he says this. He says, you are blessed when you are pure in heart, because then you'll see God. Then you'll see God. And so this is going to be a 4-week kind of health check to ask ourselves the question, how is it going with my heart? And so this morning we're going to look at jealousy. Next week we're going to look at anger. The third week we're going to look at guilt. And then finally, we're going to conclude with the reality of greed. But this morning, we're going to look at jealousy. Such a common emotion that can begin so young. I appreciate the honesty of kids, you know. I noticed their hands went up a whole lot quicker than anyone else sitting in the back. Right? Who struggles with jealousy? No, not me. I sit on my hands for this one, right? Jealousy is ugly. It's ugly when you see it in others, and it's just as ugly when you see it in yourself. And so we know, and I love the words of the Bible, you know, jealousy just kind of rots away at our bones, rots away at our soul. And so we're going to turn to a passage in the Bible because we always want to get our cues from the Bible to see how this can have an impact for us. And so we're going to turn to a passage really early on in the Bible, and I love it. Right off the hop, the very first family in the Bible, Adam and Eve. They mess up. They have kids, Cain and Abel. And guess what? Right off the hop, what do you know? Sibling rivalry. Ever heard of that? You ever struggle with that? No? You're not telling the truth. We're going to deal with honesty next week. That's what we're going to deal with, right? Right? You see it right off the hop, right? And so if you have a Bible, you can turn to it. If you have your iPad or your iPhone or another phone, you can turn to it. If you don't have a Bible, you'll notice there's Bibles in the pews in front of you. We're going to turn to page chapter 3. Genesis is such a good book because it's so easy to find, right? Just flip through the table of contents and it's like right there. If you don't have a Bible at home, we would love for you to take one of ours with you, to take it and to use it, to mark it up, to ask questions about it, and to begin reading it, to make sure that what I'm saying on a Sunday morning is actually what the Bible is saying, you know, to be checking up on ourselves. And so we're going to read this story of Cain and Abel, one of the very first instance of jealousy in the Bible, and then we're going to look at, see, what are some of the symptoms that we need to be aware of, and then what are some of the proactive steps we can take so that we can truly have that abundant life that Jesus offers to us. And so Jill's going to come and read this passage for us this morning.
So it's Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 to 16, and as Joel said, it's on page 3 of your Pew Bible. Hear the word of the Lord. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have produced a man with the help of the Lord. Next she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel, for his part, brought of the firstlings of his flock, their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. Cain said to his brother Abel, Let us go out to the field. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is your brother Abel? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it will no longer yield to you its strength. You will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Today you have driven me away from the soil, and I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and anyone who meets me may kill me. Then the Lord said to him, Not so. Whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance. And the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who came upon him would kill him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The word of our Lord.
Thank you, Jill. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Bible, but I think one of those stories, that story there just highlights again the reality of a misconception of thinking that when we look at the Bible and we look at the people that God uses, they're perfect people, right? That they don't have any issues. It couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, we're 4 chapters in and we see just misstep after misstep after misstep. And if you continue reading through the Bible, you see that jealousy is just lurking everywhere. And so the reality of the Bible is not that people are perfect, but that in spite of our mess-ups, in spite of us falling short, in spite of us falling into areas of jealousy, God doesn't give up on us. That God still wants to use us and transform us to make a difference. And so I read a story like Cain and Abel, I hear that read, and it kind of encourages me a little bit, because I realize that in spite of the human condition, God is not done with us yet. And so here we turn to the story of Cain and Abel. And I think there are some great things that we can pull out and look at the principles of what does jealousy begin to look like in our life. Because jealousy can kind of bleed into so many other avenues and realities that I want to just simply look at 2 things that often jealousy begins to creep up into. Because what I love about this verse, and I don't know if you mark up your Bible, if you write in it, if you ask questions in it, I do, and I think it's okay to do that. Verses 6 and 7. So if you just want to turn to verses 6 and 7, because there's an interesting conversation that God has with Cain, right? I think one of the first things we need to hear, that experiencing the emotion of jealousy is not the issue, right? We don't want to go away from here thinking, wow, I get these pull of jealousy, when I see someone with a nicer vehicle than me, or when I see someone else get a promotion, or someone's a little better looking than me, or whatever it may be. Having that tug of jealousy means you're actually breathing and your heart is beating, right? That's the reality. Because what we pick up on is the situation where Cain and Abel have both brought an offering to God. And Abel's is accepted, and Cain is not. And Cain is not happy about it. He's angry. His face is downcast. He's sulking, right? And God comes up to him, and he says, Cain, why are you angry? Why are you sulking? It's not an act. It's not a question of condemnation, because then God follows up with this. Don't you know that if you do what is right, you too will be accepted? And so don't take away from this morning that I can never feel jealousy. Jealousy is going to be a reality. The question we want to address is, how do we respond in a way that is favorable and positive? How do we not allow our emotions to control us, but rather we control our emotions? Because then God gives Cain this incredible imagery. He says, don't you know that if you do what is right, you will be accepted? But sin is lurking at your door. It desires to have you. You must master it. I love that image of lurking. I live with a family of lurkers. They love to lurk and scare the you-know-what out of Dad. They learn it from their mother, Rebecca. Right? They have a skill. Well, they'll hide behind couches. They'll wait for me as I come out of the bathroom. They'll hide in dark corners. They'll wait for me to come home and open the door. And then they just pounce on good old Dad, because Dad lets out these really weird girly screams when he gets scared. And they love it. I tell them, you're taking years off my life. And they do it anyways. And so what I devised is a plan. I need to be aware that I live with lurkers, right? And so when I come out of the bathroom, I'm like just looking around the corner. If I see a light go off, I'm like, okay. Because if I see someone crouching in the corner, I'm like, busted, you're not going to get me this time. And I think that's the image that God gives to us about jealousy. Jealousy loves to lurk in some of the corners of our life that we need to be aware of. And so I want to talk about 2 areas that I believe this passage speaks to in terms of where jealousy loves to lurk. It's all about knowing what your blind spots are. Just acknowledge the fact that, you know what? I could have an issue with jealousy. And so one of the first places I think jealousy loves to lurk is those areas where you desire success. Jealousy doesn't lurk in every reality of life, but it's in those areas that you desire success. Whatever you want to achieve in life, there's the likelihood that jealousy is going to be right there. Because chances are is there's going to be someone who is going to be more successful and better than you at what you want to be really good at. Let me illustrate from my own life. This morning, if I were to say to you, I am really jealous of Chuck. Now, Chuck is the guy who plays the piano. He oversees all of our music. He is phenomenal at piano. If I say I'm jealous of Chuck and his ability to play the piano, that's not really an issue in my life, because anyone who knows me knows I'm not musical in the least. It's not an area that I'm striving for success in my life. My parents can put up their hands and agree with this. When I was a little boy, they put me in piano. Right, years and years of practicing and tinkling and this and that. I never got into grade 1. Like, who doesn't get into grade 1 in piano? Like, just push the kid into grade 1. Give him the grade 1 book. Nope, not my piano teachers. So I moved on to guitar. A couple years of guitar, strumming away. Now, that's not going to work, right? You think my parents would give it up by the second instrument. No, you're in a grade 7 and grade 8. Why don't you try trumpet? Yeah, that's a great instrument to give to a kid that's lousy at music. Give him a trumpet. Right now, my brother, who's 2 years older than me, he's phenomenal. He's really good at trumpet. And so now I'm stepping into high school, and he has a band leader who's like, oh, I got one Sherbino kid who's a great trumpeter. Now I've got his younger brother. I can really build something. Not on my watch, right? I was the kid in the band where the teacher is like, just hold it up, but don't breathe. Right? So when I say I'm jealous of Chuck, it's a compliment. I can acknowledge his ability, and because that's not an area of success that I'm striving for in my life. You know what is an issue of jealousy for me? Communicators, other pastors, other churches. It's ugly, but I acknowledge the fact because I want to be successful as a communicator. I want to be successful as a pastor. I want to be successful in terms of leading a local church. And I can see jealousy lurking when I see and hear of other men and women who are great communicators, or other churches that are thriving. And I just need to acknowledge that. Just to acknowledge that this is a blind spot for me. You see, one of the symptoms, one of the ways that jealousy begins to appear in your life is when someone else is successful in an area that you desire success, you may be prone to a little bit of gossip. You may be prone to say a few things about them because for some twisted reason, we think that if we can knock them down a little bit, it may raise us up a little bit. Jealousy loves to try to make us believe that maybe I'll feel a little bit better about myself if someone who else I see as successful is a little less successful. It's just starting to acknowledge the symptoms and the reality. I mean, that's what happened with Cain and Abel, right? They both offered a sacrifice to God. They both wanted to be successful in earning the favor of God. And Abel's was accepted and Cain's was not. It wasn't about the offering. It was about not being successful. And so one of the first things we start to do if we honestly want to acknowledge it is to say, what are the areas that I desire success? Is it in my parenting? Is it in the car that I drive, or the clothes that I wear, or the amount of money that I have? Is it the job title that I'm striving for? Is it with other people in my family? What is it that you're striving for? Just be aware that jealousy may not be too far behind. Because when you suddenly start to see other people that are more successful than you in areas where you want success, jealousy begins to lurk. And it's getting ready to pounce. The second area that I think jealousy often lurks is in circumstances and situations where it just doesn't seem fair. Have you ever noticed that? Maybe at work and you're working harder than someone else, you're putting in more time than someone else, you're being more honest than someone else, and then it's time for a promotion and the boss promotes the other person. And you're like, that's not fair. And jealousy begins to just start to work away. You know what I love about this passage about Cain and Abel is we're not told why Cain's sacrifice was not accepted. Now, some incredibly smart and brilliant individuals have offered suggestions and have offered theories, but ultimately that's where it ends. You know, some may say, well, you know what? Cain's sacrifice was not accepted because he didn't give his best. There's some language there that talks about when Abel gave the animals to God, when he sacrificed the animals, he gave his firstlings. It's kind of a weird word, but first fruits. Basically it means he gave God his best. That was the descriptor of the gift. Cain, we're told, just gave some fruit and vegetables. He just gave to God. And so some may say, well, the absence of the firstlings, the absence of the best, maybe Cain didn't give his best. Yeah, maybe, it's plausible, it could be likely, but you can't 100% say for sure. Others will say because of other passages, well, maybe Cain didn't give with the right attitude, right? That sure he gave his best, but Abel gave with his whole heart, but Cain didn't give with the right attitude, and so that is the issue. Plausible, potential, but we don't know. And that's where the tension begins to lie. Because if we knew the reason why Cain's sacrifice was not accepted 100%, then we could say, Cain, buddy, sorry, man, you have no reason to be upset about this. You didn't give your best. You gave your leftovers. Or you didn't give with the best attitude. You just kind of gave. And so, buddy, that's on you. But that's often where jealousy loves to lurk. In the areas that are just unfair. It's just not fair. And I wish I had a better answer for you, but I think we just have to own it, accept it, and learn to deal with it. Because oftentimes where jealousy loves to lurk is in areas that we desire success, or in circumstances and situations that we determine as being unfair. And so what's the solution? What's the alternative? You know, our goal is not just to gather more information. In the same way that if you know you have a heart condition, your doctor can tell you, you need to exercise better, you need to eat healthier, you need to just improve your overall health. And you can carry that knowledge. Does it make you any healthier? Nah, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. You actually have to put into practice what the doctor has said. And so that's why we turn back to the Bible and say, okay, what can we do to counteract the reality of jealousy? Because what happened to Cain is because his life didn't go into the toilet because he was a jealous individual. His life went into the toilet because he acted on his jealousy. He killed his brother. Look at the consequences of that. Ruined that relationship. Would have significantly and severely damaged his relationship with his parents. Had to become a wanderer. And we're even told at the very end that he left the presence of God. I don't know about you, but I want to get out in front of my jealousy. Because I don't want to wreck my life. I don't want to wreck my relationship with others. And I don't want to wreck my relationship with God. But if we don't get out in front of jealousy, that is the path we're going down. That's why Jesus continually said, look at the condition of your heart. Check in. You are blessed if you have a pure heart. It's not a perfect heart, but it's an acknowledgement that, jealousy lurks within and I need to deal with this. And so what's our response? I want to suggest two things. An inner response and an outer action. The inner response is what I was talking to the kids about. Thanksgiving. You see, who wants to carry around extra weight in their life? We don't want to do that. It prevents us from truly living the abundant life that Jesus is offering to us, but it means we need to be people of thanksgiving. And I love it. It's in 1 Thessalonians when Paul says, be thankful in all circumstances. A lot of times we attach thanksgiving to when things go well for us. But maybe Paul was talking more about the reality of just being able to give thanks when things go well for someone else. Can we be thankful then? because that will begin to counteract jealousy. So that's the inner response. The outward response, one word: celebration. Celebrate other people. Celebrate the people that are becoming more successful than you. The success that you want in your life. Do it publicly, do it outwardly, do it to them, do it to telling others. It's like the opposite of gossip. You know, when in my case, if I hear of another church that is growing and is booming, I know there's a temptation to say, yeah, but I'm sure they do da da da. No, celebrate that. Like, come on, Joel, get it together here, right? This is the kingdom of God we're talking about. Don't let petty jealousy bring you down and bring others down. So celebrate other people. Now, I know that the automatic response is going to be, well, what if I don't really feel like it? That just seems insincere and inauthentic. My suggestion is get over it, right? Let your emotions catch up to your behaviors. Don't wait for your emotions to determine your behavior, because guess what? They're not gonna, right? You're gonna simply sit there and say, well, when I feel like celebrating someone. No, that's not how it works. Celebrate people. Celebrate their success. Celebrate the good that they are doing, and I guarantee you this: it will begin to change your heart. It may take a little while, but it will begin to change your heart. I love it when I meet other people who may be in business and are in competition with another business. You know, you walk into a store ready to purchase something, and if the salesperson starts bad-mouthing another company, it doesn't make me want to buy. But when another salesperson can, promote what they're doing, but also celebrate a competitor's product as well, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Or when I hear other people kind of speak poorly of other churches, it just turns me the wrong way. You can apply it into your own circumstance. Right? How do we begin to celebrate other people? How do we start to do that? And so this week, on the back of your bulletin, there's just a couple questions for you to consider. The first one is what might your blind spot be? Where are those areas of success? Where are those moments of life that have just seemed unfair? Maybe just take some time to name it, just so that you are aware of the potential reality and danger. And then the second one is this: if you're struggling with jealousy, who can you celebrate? Who can you celebrate this week? Think of a person and celebrate them publicly. Go up to them, even if it doesn't feel natural. Do it anyways, because this is the way that transformation begins to form. This is the way that we begin to live the life that Jesus desires for us. A question that suddenly came to mind this week for me, and you may want to consider it as well, is I believe this: Jesus is more concerned with how we handle the success of others than how successful we are in our own life. Think about that. You may disagree, but I often wonder, if we truly want to deal with jealousy, Jesus is at least as concerned with how we handle the success of others, because that goes to character. Our success goes to accomplishment. And Jesus didn't come and Jesus didn't die so that we would become the most successful people in whatever field we desire. Jesus came so that we could truly live. Jesus died so that we could truly be forgiven. And when we begin to experience His grace in our life, we desire to overcome the dangers that will pull us away from Him. And that's why we deal with jealousy. That's why we deal with jealousy. And so this week, what are your blind spots? This week, who can you celebrate? And I encourage you, come back next week as we look at anger and what God has to say about that. Let us pray together.